I'm a straight narrative historian. I like telling stories.
He's certainly Britain's best-known and most popular historian.
His admirers, like me, have often been puzzled by his Jekyll and Hyde personality.
I know exactly what it's like arguing with you. It's like holding a wet eed in a high wind, because you slither out every single time with your brilliance.
His books made him one of the century's most influential historians. His television appearances and his journalism made him a household name.
I'm a particular kind of historian, the easiest kind. I write narrative, I write politics.
AJP Taylor was a Don at Oxford. He'd been at Magdalen College, Oxford, since 1938, and he'd been lecturing until 1963, so he was a very, very accomplished lecturer. And he was also what sometimes we're pejoratively called TV historian.
I don't understand, except that I dislike the Germans, why merely wanting your country to be the most powerful in the world puts you into the head of a wicked statesman.
Clever, but did he merely want that, or did he want it at a certain price?
As well as being a lecturer and a writer of history books, he wrote articles and took political stances and so on, and of course went on television. AJP Taylor was brilliant at being a storyteller as well as a lecturer.
I was walking home one night in Oxford with a friend, and he said, why aren't you a member of the Communist Party? And I couldn't offhand think of any answer. So on this extremely inadequate ground, I joined the Communist Party.
He didn't believe in the dry as dust side of history, of just a recitation of facts and dates and so on. He very much wanted to get personality over. And you see this in this series of lectures. He is very much committed to telling a story.
The true warlord was a man of unique power, dominating both the military and civil affairs of his country. A dictator whose power was unlimited and who made all the vital decisions.
The programme is very much an attempt to tell the story of the Second World War through the lens of its 6 most important leaders. Dictators, of course, in the case of Hitler and Tojo and Mussolini, and democratically elected politicians as well, like President Roosevelt and Winston Churchill. The format is surprisingly stark.
Ladies and gentlemen, in 1932, when Lady Astor was in Russia, she told Stalin that Churchill was finished.
As soon as you see it, it's with the black background. It's unlike any kind of television that you see nowadays. And that has tremendous strength in that he has an interesting face with his bow tie and his glasses, and you concentrate, therefore. There could be a major problem in that it could bore viewers. But luckily, what comes out of his mouth means that you're never bored for an instant.
Mussolini and Clara Petacci, because there was nowhere else for them to be, were in bed. They got out. Mussolini, believing he was being rescued, said to the communist leader, "You have come to rescue me. I will give you an empire." The last of his illusions or pretenses. Clara Petacci, more practically minded, was fumbling under the bedclothes. The partisan thought she was looking for a gun. He said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm looking for my knickers."
There was a side to AJP Taylor which was naturally perverse.
Unemployment is one of the simplest things to get rid of, because all you need to do to get rid of unemployment is this extraordinary, they didn't know this in 1929, is to give people work.
He was a political activist of the left. He was a supporter of the unilateral nuclear disarmament campaign and so on. And so he was never just going to make a straightforward TV show which didn't have any kind of modern political echoes in his criticisms of Winston Churchill, for example.
Churchill combined extreme impatience, a readiness to throw out new ideas. Hardly a day passed without his producing some idea for a new offensive. Roosevelt, who was a bit skeptical about him, said, you know, Winston has 100 ideas every day, and one of them is almost sure to be right.
In what is overall a very pro-Churchill essay, essentially, and in his remarks about Stalin.
He dominated the Military Council of Defense, which was composed mainly of his own satellite politicians. He also dominated the political body which ran internal Russia. He even was chairman of the committee which later on issued directions to the partisans. Indeed, you can really say it's an incomparable achievement that every line of policy had to run through Stalin's study.
He himself had visited Stalin's Russia in 1925 and 1934, so he knew what he was talking about. And the good thing was, really, though, that he didn't ever impose these ideological views on the viewer. You can take it or leave it, which is obviously one of the best things about the work of a really top-class historian.
Stalin, incidentally, was the only warlord of the Second World War who actually shot his generals for failure in the field.
One of the most impressive things about this series is AJP Taylor's inherent sense of timing. He was a lecturer, of course, for many years, and so he knew how to wind up a lecture. But you can almost see him getting into the peroration of his speeches in the last 30 seconds or so, and every single one ended at 28 minutes, virtually to the second.
His body disappeared. And with this death and disappearance, Hitler performed a final service to the German people. He carried with him into obscurity the responsibility for the World War and the guilt for the crimes and atrocities with which it had been accompanied. As a result, the German people were left innocent.
Millions of people watched this. It was one of the most watched history series in the history of history series. And that was because an awful lot of people, of course, remembered the Second World War. It went out only 31 years after the end of the war. But also people who wanted to make sense of what had happened between 1939 and 45, which is every sentient person. I remember at the age of 13 that I watched it with my father, who read history at Oxford, and so there was everybody from all through the ages. It was a tremendously popular TV series.
The Battle of Britain was, for this country, our country, the decisive battle of the war. It ensured that Great Britain would not be invaded.
The fact that people had gone through the Blitz and lots of people had been evacuated, and the war was a people's war. It was a popular war, of course, because it had to be fought against the most sinister evil of the 20th century. And so it was something that was still affecting the lives of everybody for many years after it ended. And so to try to get an intellectual view of it, a way in which one could understand what had happened from one of the top historians of his time, was something that was going to be attractive to millions of people.
A figure who could impress people, not only make them fear, but could also inspire them. Again and again, a general faced with the problems of the front has flown to Hitler's headquarters, determined to impress the truth on him. And after half an hour has come out uplifted and said, it's going to be all right, the Führer has said we shall win.
It's really important for an audience to get a sense of the connection of what these war leaders were like as people, as well as strategists and statesmen.
Almost 30 years after the two had parted, they met again. Roosevelt renewed his early love. It was all kept intensely secret. The Secret Service, in fact, and you know how powerful that is in the United States, provided all its resources in order to ensure that the president could be alleged going off to one place when in fact he was meeting his friend in another.
He was always very interested in getting personality across, and it's tremendously important that he should do that, not just because it's much more interesting, but also because it underlines an absolutely essential feature of history, which is that the individual has personal responsibility.
Sometimes he went around in a siren suit, rather like children's rompers. And with his baby face, he looked like an overgrown child bouncing around in rompers and had the same exuberance of spirit.
It's very important that an historian should be objective about facts when he's writing a book. I think it's slightly different. You can put more of your own personality, and thus obviously more of your own politics, into a TV show. It's okay for historians to take political stands, of course it is.
Japan is the only great power which has steadfastly refused to make or to possess nuclear weapons. And in this, the Japanese are an example to us all.
What they must never do is allow that to infect the truth of the storytelling.
The Russians lost something like 4 million dead, and at least 2 million Russian prisoners of war passed into German captivity, many of them then being murdered by the Germans.
History is much more than just a parlour game. It's not just there for entertainment. It does have some lessons, and no period in history has greater lessons than that of the Nazis and the rise of Hitler and the outbreak of the Second World War. Now, that doesn't mean that we should treat every single dictator as Hitler every time one appears, but we should learn some of the tropes that you get again and again with dictators. And in that, this series is extremely useful.
In 1938, Hitler had a stroke of luck. The war minister, very odd thing to do, married a woman who'd had a record as a prostitute, or I suspect, really, only just as a nude model. At any rate, he was discredited. He was driven to resign, and no new war minister was appointed. So from that moment, Hitler was not merely the theoretical, he was the practical head of the three services.
Although half a century's gone by, a lot of what AJP Taylor said, indeed almost all of what AJP Taylor said, has been backed up by subsequent historical research. So although he gets a few things wrong, Hitler's campaign in Russia, you could argue, actually did have some major offensives in 1943, for example. I know that sounds like a small thing, but nonetheless, some historians would take issue with that and with other things, especially not mentioning the Holocaust anything like enough. Otherwise, overall, it stands the test of time as a serious contribution from a top historian talking about really the most important subjects of the whole of the 20th century.
It's frightfully unfair, my life. I've been paid handsome sums all my life to do what I should probably have done in any case.